Welcome to another episode of Culinary School Stories, the weekly podcast that is dedicated to sharing the stories of people around the globe whose lives have been influenced, impacted, touched, and or enriched, for good or for bad, from their culinary school experience. Hi, my name is Colin Roach, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. You are an important part of this show, where we ask the question, what's your culinary school story? So now, without any further delay, let's meet today's guest. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Culinary School Stories podcast, which is a proud member of the Food Media Network. My guest today is a graduate and a former chef instructor from Johnson & Wales University's Providence, Rhode Island campus. And she has an awesome culinary school story they're going to share with all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Chef Linda Kender. Linda, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Colin. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So fun. I haven't seen you in a long time. I know we have, share history from the school and stuff. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say as well. But let's start right out I want to ask you, how did you get into cooking and why did you go to culinary school?
I was thinking about that. I remember when I was in high school, all the time growing up, actually. My mother always cooked. My grandma always cooked. And I always cooked. And we grew up, my sister, brother, and I grew up in Sutton, Massachusetts. Not a lot to do back there. Back then, it was the 70s. And we cooked all the time. And I remember very clearly, I was standing in the kitchen. And I had just finished making a cake. And always have been a little OCD as far as things are concerned. Would explain things later on in my career. And I remember decorating the top of this cake very strategically with blueberries, all the same size and all pointed in the same direction. And I picked it up and I said, I should be a chef. And the rest is history.
Wow.
The next thing I know, my father, because I really had no direction. A lot of kids when you're in high school, especially you're talking like the 70s now, early 70s, what do? You go to work at the post office, or you get, you sign on with some company and you stay there for 40 years and then you retire. Mm-hmm. But my dad had read about Johnson & Wales, and it had just started. It was 1973 that it started its first culinary program. And he said, we're going to take a ride. And I said, and where are we taking, where we are? Providence, Rhode Island. Where the heck is Providence, Rhode Island? It's less than an hour down the road. And I walked in to the College of Culinary Arts. It wasn't a college, it was a school. We shared this building with, I think it was like a recruitment induction center for the services. And we had half of it and they had half of it that we couldn't go near. And I remember walking in and the first person I met was Franz Lemoyne. Franz Lemoyne was the first director of the culinary school. And he took us around. He took us around. I was flabbergasted. It was like I was meant to be there. The kitchens and the equipment and the accents and everything. I'm just like, oh boy, please, Dad, please. And he made me a deal. He said, I will pay for your first year. And if you're interested, you'll figure out how to pay for the second.
Wow.
And that's kind of like how I was introduced to Johnson & Wales the very first time.
Great. So it was a pretty small, I'm imagining then, not like it is today.
Very, very small.
How many kitchens do you remember and chefs?
Oh, there weren't but a dozen or so, if that. I'm trying to remember. I know that they had a couple of dining rooms. There was a Garde Manger kitchen. There was a storeroom, which was little tiny. And it was it was in its infancy. And I guess it falls into the category of if you build it, they will come. Because I saw it September 1974 for the very first time. And the very last time I saw it was the day after Memorial Day, 2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was that in that, was that an armory building? Was that the original building?
It was more like I think it was more like an induction center. There was one area that eventually, it's still there. It's called South Hall. It's a dorm, but I believe it was barracks at one point. So I know that the culinary school had half of the building. The other half, we weren't allowed to go in, but we would peek and see what was going on back there and stuff like that. So it was very, very small. And I can't remember how many folks were in my class. I don't believe it was close to 200. I mean, around that time, I think the whole student population was probably 200. I was one of maybe a dozen females.
Out of the whole school?
Maybe a dozen. Out of the whole school back then, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what was it like that first day? You're excited. You already toured the campus. Your dad's paying 1 year. You're there.
1 year.
You're showing up. You're going to get knife kits, I'm guessing, uniforms, and they're going to take us about first day. What's going through in your head, and what are you seeing, and walk us through it.
The first day, the first experience down there, when my parents dropped me off, was a little bit intimidating because, like I said, I grew up in Sutton, Massachusetts. There was no one in Sutton, Massachusetts who didn't look like me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We weren't a very diverse community. I went to high school. I graduated with 45 or 50 students. I got to Weybosset Street in Providence, and we lived in a place called Crown Hall. And 7 or 8 floors, and people of all color and creed and everything and all of this, and being in a room with someone you don't know, and all the things that you try to look at the freshmen that you see now and say, it's going to be okay. You just, take a breath. It's going to be okay. But the first day, I remember standing in line for toolkits and uniforms. And there weren't really books so much as they were like pamphlets that were put together. And when we started right off the bat. The uniforms went on. The bus picked us up and brought us down to the culinary school. I don't remember first classes. I don't remember a lot of things other than I was very enthusiastic. I was very much looking forward to it. I had already met a lot of people. As a matter of fact, one of the very first people that I met was Paul McVetti. He eventually turned out, as you know, to be one of the deans over at the university.
What was he when you met him? What was this? Was he?
He was a fellow classmate.
Oh, okay.
He graduated the same year I did, along with a lot of others. Jerry Fernandez and a lot of folks that really have made wonderful careers for them.
Great. And so you don't remember your first class, but were you good? Did you have experience besides the cake with the blueberries on it? Were you in there feeling out of your element or in your element? How was that?
Everybody who was over the age of 16 in Sutton, Massachusetts at that time got a job at Pleasant Valley Country Club. That was the place to go, the place to be. And I was no different. I got a job as the pantry girl. And weekends I would work there, and then, obviously go to high school and stuff like that. But I worked in the kitchen prior to. And this will take you back, Colin. I remember, the kids talk about all this molecular gastronomy and all of this sort of stuff, or molecular gastronomy, pardon me. But I remember making things like cranberry shrubs and lettuce wedges with the pimento and the Thousand Island dressing on it, okay? Fruit cups from out of a jar with the maraschino cherry. Woo-hoo, that was the big thing.
Maybe a little coconut on top. Woo!
A little green coconut to make it look nice. That was like the extent of it back then. But getting back to the university, Johnson Wales, at that point, one of the things that I really enjoyed about it is they had what they call PKA and PKB. And you'd spend one day in a lecture hall with the chef preparing the entire menu. And then the next day you'd go into the lab and you would prepare whatever was on your list of things you prepare for that day. So I remember watching Chef Larkin. I'm trying to think of some of the names. I'm like, Chef Larkin, I remember him, PKA and PKB, doing demonstrations, and then the next day going in and teaching, and you take your tedious notes and all the different things, and you go in and you just have a hell of a time for yourself, I remember one of my favorite classes, of course, was Garde Manger, and that was with Chef Flattery. And that was back in the days where if you didn't learn your recipes, you're out. That's it. And everybody feared this man, feared him, because it's out of the realm of everybody's area of expertise. Garde Manger, of course. Garde Manger doesn't mean just making salads and fruit cups. Now you're talking galantines and ballantines and pâtés and stuff that your average 18, 19-year-old kid has no idea what this is all about. And now you're standing there, and he used to line us up like soldiers in a row. And he would say, okay, now start to recite the recipe for chicken galantine. You go. What's the first 3 ingredients? You go. What's the next 3 ingredients? And everybody would be like shaking in their boots, Oh, am I going to get this part? Am I going to get this part? What's he going to ask me? But we learned it.
If you didn't know it, you were gone. He just said, go find out.
You were gone. That was it. See you
later.
Go
study it and come back when you knew it? Or?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it helped people remember it, I guess, by fear.
Yeah, learning by intimidation.
How was the equipment back then? I mean, it's changed so much. I mean, immersion circulators, of course, all these type of things, robo-coops. What was it back then? Buffalo choppers and... Buffalo choppers,
slicers, equipment that, unless you had any experience in a kitchen somewhere, you wouldn't. I mean, who's got a buffalo chopper at their house?
Right.
You know what I mean? So you'd go and there was also one area where, and I'm trying to remember if this was equipment ID class or something like that, where you would go and you'd spend the time and they would show you, all right, this is a buffalo chopper. This is how you break it down. This is how you clean it. This is how you put it back together again. This is, the version of a blender or a robo-coup and those types of things. The equipment was primitive, but for the time, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was modern.
Looking back at it now, it'd go into the culinary museum, be on display.
Now, back then, you actually had your labs, if I'm correct, were also feeding actual students.
Yes.
Right? It's like, so you had to meet that at that time. Like breakfast, I'm sure, was like 5 a.m. or something like that, right?
Yes.
So it's changed. Your schedule was not a set schedule like 7 to 1. It was whatever the class needed you at?
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
So there was probably people that were late or in the morning ones and
late in the morning. We were really all over the place. We had a pantry class. We had, classical French classes. They still taught the classics, which was always one of my favorite things, when it comes to cooking or like eating, because you can't go wrong with egg yolks and butter,
Yeah.
Nothing like the taste of a real hollandaise sauce compared to Knorr's that you sprinkle a little milk in. So those were always my favorite. One of the things, and it just came to me. I remember sitting in the dining room, and when they would run out of food, and the kitchens would often run out of food. Your table would be stuck with a chicken liver omelet. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. The chicken liver omelets, which are just like, oh my God, who can eat that stuff? Oh, sorry, the chef ran out of food. He'll make you a chicken liver omelet. I'm good.
You couldn't get a plain omelet or a cheese omelet? It had to have the chicken.
Kind of like the way it went.
They wanted to get rid of them? They wanted to use them up?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to someone today, knowing how it's changed and evolved culinary school, and they wanted to go? They were going to say, I want to go to culinary school. What would you tell them? What kind of advice or recommendations, or even someone just wanted to enter this industry, and they're coming to you for like that first kind of advice or guidance on what they should expect or what they should know or what they should be, prepared for?
I would tell them that the industry as we know it is about to change tremendously. I don't know how that change is going to take place, but you can always see it, already with, like the new delivery systems and the takeouts and the door dashes and those types of things. I would tell my students, and I do, one of the things that I would ask them when we would meet for the very first time, what was the best advice anybody ever gave you? And they really had some very interesting things. So I thought, I'm thinking, okay, well, I have to share that with them as well. So what's the best advice I ever received? Well, the best advice I ever received, number one, was shut up and show me. Quite simply, yep. But, I know within 5 seconds whether you know what you're doing or not. Pick up that tool and show me, okay? Never say never. You can never say never. You can never come into a class like sanitation or menu planning and cost control and say, I'll never use this again in my life. Why am I doing this? And I explained to them, because when I was coming up and I didn't like menu planning and cost control, knowing that 30 years later or 35 years later that I'd be standing in front of you with like 80 eyeballs looking at me teaching this. So you can never say never. You have to keep an open mind. And the best advice that I would give any one of them is to find a mentor. Find a mentor, and it has to be a personal relationship. Someone can't assign you a mentor. You will find a mentor. I found my mentor in April 1979. I remember that clearly.
Wow.
And you know who that was, Colin?
I could probably guess, but you go ahead.
Moshe Nograd.
Yep.
I met him April 1979. I was 23-ish when I met him. And I stayed with him up until the day he died. I spoke with him every morning, or when he finally retired and went on emeritus, I spoke with him several times a week. I went to Florida and visited with him. And even though I was in my 40s, 50s, 60s, not so much 60, pushing 60, he would still call me up and say, Linda, give me the advice du jour.
Now, were you working at the college at the Johnson & Wales when he came there?
Yes, I had, I was very fortunate. And a lot of people don't realize this. They see me in my uniform teaching menu planning and cost control, sanitation, food safety, which I love. But they don't know any of the history, which is why I was so excited about having this conversation with you, because I've really had 3, if not 4 careers at the university. I graduated in 76, and I stayed on as a fellowship student. And taking that fellowship position really let them do whatever they wanted to with us. And what they wanted to do with us at the time was help them open up the commercial properties. So I was sent to the Rhode Island Inn, which is the first commercial property that Johnson & Wales had purchased. And it would eventually become the first practicum site. So they bought it when it was just going out of business, and they still had all these banquets booked, and we were trying to hold up our end of the bargain. So we were following through with the weddings and the brunches and all of this sort of stuff. So I took a job there as the pantry girl, because back in the 70s, the only female chef that was poking around was Giles, And that was one of the first things that Franz Lemoyne said to me when we went to tour the facility the first time. You're more than welcome to come to school here, but there's no such thing as a woman chef.
Wow.
I'm like, really? So I was the pantry girl, and I would take care of the brunches. And I told you, that whole OCD thing came into play because the Garde Manger was something that I was fascinated by, and I just had a knack for it. And the guys didn't want to do it anyway, because let the redheaded girl do it, So the first time I saw Moshe, I was standing in the pantry, and where my pantry area was, I looked directly down the stairs, and all of a sudden this man comes running up the stairs, and I'm like, who is this? And he starts opening the reach-ins and checking in the low boys and looking in the walk-in boxes, and he's walking around checking everybody out, and he never says a word. And he goes back downstairs, and I'm thinking, what happened? What just happened? What is that? The next thing you know, we get introduced to him. He's the new food and beverage manager at the Rhode Island Inn. And we all took bets at that point, because I knew I was eventually going back to the College of Culinary Arts, back to the culinary school, because I was scheduled to teach pantry. And I didn't think anything about it, but we used to take bets as to how long these chefs would last, because the place was just a ridiculously run nightmare. It was a nightmare. And I remember hard cooking a case of eggs for brunch or something like that, and I overcooked every single one of them. We start cracking them open, and they're all green. And I'm like, oh, brother, And then Moshe, who was standing there at that point, I said, what makes them turn green?
He said that to you, or you said it?
Oh, no, I said that to him.
Oh, okay.
And he went back downstairs, and he came back upstairs, and he had a book. And he took the book, and he started reading it from back to front. And it was all in Hebrew. And he started reading me about, the combination of sulfur and the iron and all of that sort of jazz. And I was so impressed. And he would teach me things, and it got to the point where you could feel that bond starting.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came time for me to go back to the college, to the culinary school, I begged him not to let me go. I said, please, I want to stay with you, please. And I did. And every morning, and I remember this as clear as bell, every morning, 5:00 in the morning, I try to beat him in. If he'd say 6:00, I'd come in at 5:45, he'd already be there. I'll get him, 5:00, I'm in, he's already there with coffee waiting for me. And those hours that he and I spent together over a cup of coffee and going through menus and preparations and just stories, I will treasure for the rest of my life.
Wow. That's awesome. So that's when he became your mentor, was during the egg situation?
Well, he became my mentor along the line. He and I developed a very special bond, because I've never been intimidated by anybody in my life, male or female, never. And he intimidated a lot of the others, the men. He could be. You've met him. He can be tough. And he and I never had that relationship. He never put me in a situation where I felt uncomfortable, where I was afraid of him or anything like that, because I'd be the first one to say, I don't understand what you're talking about. You know, cantaloupe. I want you to cut the cantaloupe like wolf's teeth. I'm like, wolf's teeth? What are you talking about? And he was like, wolf's teeth, wolf's teeth. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about.
I haven't seen a wolf lately.
Yeah, there's not a lot of wolves running around here in Warwick, you know. But then he would show me how to do it, and we just became, you know.
Yeah. Now that was one job. You said you had three careers there. So that was one.
Three careers. The first one was out on the commercial properties. I started off at the Rhode Island Inn. I learned my trade. I spent years there. Moshe eventually, and I begged him. Every time we would go through another chef, I begged him to let me take on the position. And he kept saying, you're not ready. You're not ready. You're not ready. And I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. What he didn't realize is that all the chefs that were leaving, it was because of me, because I underhandedly would sabotage them. Oopsie, I'm sorry. Did I just shut off that stock pot? I'm sorry. Did I actually shut that oven off? Oh my God. One of those types of things. And I was notorious, and the others who knew me knew what I was doing. And Moshe eventually gave me the chance to be the executive chef at the banquet hall there. And he would come up to me out of a moment's notice for whatever reason and just slap me on the cheek and say, you are my favorite. And that would be like, oh no, you're going to make me cry. I don't want to cry in front of the boys. Like one of these things. So I did that, and I was part of a team. This is when I was introduced. I met Reggie Dow and Billy Aldrich, God bless him, a bunch of us. And the second property that the university had at that point was the Cranston Hilton. And that was a big, big banquet facility right on the water, right down the street from the culinary school. And I was brought on as the head chef in charge of banquet and catering at that facility. So I stayed there for a while. And then we eventually opened up the place in Seekonk. We had these little SWAT scout mission group. So I was out on the commercial properties for many, many years. And Moshe had already gone back to the College of Culinary Arts to be the dean. And he called me one day and asked me if I wanted to come to the culinary school to teach Garde Manger. And I said, you know something? One of the classes I've always wanted to teach is Garde Manger. So I went back to the College of Culinary Arts, and I taught Garde Manger for, geez Louise, close to 15 years.
Wow.
I was affectionately known as the Wicked Witch of Garde Manger. I loved teaching that class.
You were a student favorite, I guess, huh?
Well, you know something? They either love me or they don't. There's no, other than a little bit of gray around here, there is no gray here.
Black and white.
Black and white. It's simple. It's linear, and it's very, very simple. So I taught Garde Manger for about 15 years, close. And then it was time, and that would be another piece of advice I would give any young student or any professional, because my career is done now. I would say when it's time, you'll know it. And move on, move on. So I was fortunate enough when it was time, I was done teaching Garde Manger. I knew it was time for me to move on. And it just happened to coincide with when they needed faculty members to teach over in the academics. And Kevin Duffy was the director at the time. And he said to me, there's a couple positions opening up over in the academics. You interested? And I said, yeah, that might be kind of something different, So I went over to the Hack building and I interviewed with Paul McVetti, who was the dean at that time, and Susan Marshall, who was the department chair. And they couldn't wait to get their hands on me. They were like, when can you start? When can it start? So I did get that position over there. I have to go through all of the stages and all the steps and the whole bit, even though you've been with the university for already by 30 years, but that's okay. And I was intimidated by the teaching of menu planning and cost control. I knew how to do it. Moshe taught me all of that. I knew inventories and food costs and costing recipes, and I knew all of that. But it's different standing in front of a classroom. And the way it was set up at that point, and I refused to wear civilian clothes. I said, I'm a chef, and I'm teaching chefs. So I stayed in my uniform, and the September I started was the September 11th when they hit the trade towers. One of the first classes I was in, because I would go in early morning and shadow Mike Mara, who was teaching menu planning and cost control. And then I would go into the classroom at 1:00. Or the next day I would go into the classroom. And I remember standing in my bedroom, ironing my jacket, watching Imus in the morning, believe it or not. And I watched that first plane hit the tower. And I'm like, oh my God, that poor guy. Oh my God, what had happened? What happened? And then the second one. And I said, oh boy, here we go. I went into school, and as you can expect, the kids are like, now they don't want a chef now. They don't want a teacher now. Now what they want is someone to hug them and to hold them and to sit and talk with them and tell them it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And that was my first experience in the academic classroom. And then I went through and I taught menu planning and cost control. I really got into it. I really, really enjoyed it. I also taught food safety and sanitation. Then Carl Guggenmass came on board as the dean, and he decided he was going to start this new position, food safety liaison. And he said, Linda, you interested in doing something like that? And I said, very much so. Very much so. So I taught menu planning and cost control by day, and I was the food safety liaison and university inspector by afternoon.
Wow.
So I've had a whole bunch of different things, and I've been blessed because I could do all these different like mini careers in one great big career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely different, the academic to the labs. And it's funny you mentioned on 9/11, I was working for Florida Culinary Institute in West Palm Beach, and I was teaching Garde Manger. So we were actually in there teaching it. And when the announcement came, and we had a TV in there that we used to watch, vegetable carving, at that time, VHF or 8-track, we had the films that we could watch. So we actually put the TV on, and it was devastating because I had, I think she was American Airlines flight attendant, stewardess at the time, that was going to get a second degree. And so she knew those planes. She knew the people that were on it. So that was definitely tough. But, at least lab, you're moving, you're keeping busy, but the academic classes, they can be a whole different, thing. And as you know, I teach food and beverage cost control too. So I know what you're saying.
Right. The difference between the pastry and the culinary students is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. The pastry, they just get it. I don't know if it's the numbers and dealing with formulas, but, they seem to get it with the culinary, or maybe they didn't pay as much attention to the, remedial math parts of it and stuff.
Yeah.
And they just can't see past that. Or maybe they don't think it's that important.
Yep. Well, they'll figure it out soon enough.
Yeah. I always start day one, this is the most important class because you'll be the best chef in the world and still go broke if you don't know how to make money. So
Exactly.
Great. So now you just talked about your career and you've just retired. When did you retire and how many years total did you have at Johnson & Wales?
I had a total of 45.
Great.
I was the senior faculty university-wide.
Wow. So on all 4 campuses, you had been there the longest.
All 4 campuses, all the hospitality colleges and all of that. I've been there the longest. Wow. I retired June 6th. I stayed through my contract, of course, which I would do anyway. And the contract ended June 6th. And unfortunately, something, I was thinking about a couple of things. Was there anything that I regretted? What did I regret during my 45-year tenure there? The first thing that I regret, a little late now, I guess, is not continuing my degree and getting my doctorate. I did get the master's degree in education and all of that, but not getting my doctorate degree. But by the time I figured that out, it wouldn't be worth it financially, or who wants to go into retirement in a couple of years with tens of thousands of dollars of student debt? Doesn't make any sense. That, and what really broke my heart, Colin, was when I had to go in and clean out my office all alone. And there was nobody there, nobody in the building.
Oh, because of the pandemic.
Because of the pandemic. Me and the security guard who let me in. And he stayed, and we talked back and forth for a little bit. He said, when you leave, just leave the doors open and leave the keys on the desk. And call me and let me know so I can lock up. And that broke my heart. Yeah. I mean, that broke my heart. I wasn't able to go and give my friends, a goodbye hug or a handshake or a kiss or anything. I was in the office all by myself, and I was just like, boy, this is killing me. Yeah. It's just killing me.
That's a lot of years and a lot of memories to box up, huh?
Yeah. Yep. But you know what I did? I've got books all over the place, and as you do, I'm sure. And I had this great big huge bookcase in my office, and I said, something? These are all books for teaching. What am I going to do with all these books? I don't have any place at home for them. So the second term, I had 3 classes: 1 pastry and 2 culinary arts. And I said to every one of them, you are the last groups that I will be teaching here at Johnson & Wales University. I said, I've got books. Do you want books? After class, you follow me down to my office and you can take what you want. So I had, it was like the Pied Piper. I had all these kids following me, book bags and everything else. I said, here they are. I said, you don't have to take them all at once. Look at them. There's something you want. I kept 3. I kept the LaRousse, I kept the Food Lover's Companion, and I kept my giant FDA model food code. And everything else I gave to my kids.
They must have been joyful, huh? They must have been so happy.
Oh, they were thrilled. They were thrilled. Yeah. Absolutely thrilled.
Especially knowing they're coming from you, so they have a little bit of, meaning besides just buying it off of Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, and every single one of them, believe it or not, every single one of them has a great big K on everyone like that. That right there, they all know where they came from. Every time I get a book, I put a great big K on it. Like, now don't tell me that's your book.
That's mine.
That's my book.
So now that you're done, you're retired, what do you think the future is for culinary school? What do you think the future is for the industry?
The culinary school, I don't know. I watched a video on how they were going to set it up, two students at a table with the plexiglass in the center, and, picnic tables out in the green space, and arrows going this way, arrows going that way. Something, I don't know how it's going to work. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I do know for a fact, if you can't teach students how to open clams or oysters by video, if they wanted to do that, you could watch the Food Network. I think personally that our craft has always been hands-on, has to be hands-on. I'm heartbroken as to how many restaurants, just in this state, just in the small little state of Rhode Island, are going out of business. Will never open again. It's heartbreaking. What will happen with the school? I don't know. I can't even fathom how they're going to be able to teach like that. Limited capacity, limited crowds, limited numbers of students in classes. It's going to be it's going to be a difficult problem for someone to resolve. How that's going to take place. The future of culinary, well, something, I think that's a whole different set of questions, because there's people out there. I don't know who they are. I don't know where they are. They could be at Johnson & Wales College of Culinary Arts right now, for all we know, that will come up with the innovation and the technology of the future that will bring all of this back together again. How they're going to do it, I don't know. Kitchen drones with, teaching like that, or videos like this, or taking the computers into the kitchens and showing, well, this is how you saute and all of that sort of stuff. How the industry proceeds, I don't know, but that's what we do, isn't it? That's what we do.
Maybe we could do holograms. We could just come right into everyone's kitchen.
No, look at that.
Well, it's also now just changed too, isn't it? The College of Food, Innovation, and Technology. Hmm. So this would be a good project for the new college to kind of figure out what that technology, that innovation, how to save the industry.
Yeah, and they're going to have their work cut out for them. That's a fact.
So could you talk about, because you were the commercial chef, you worked all the different commercial properties. Could you talk about the importance of gaining experience in the industry while you're in school or before you go to school?
It is so important. One of the things that I always did, even when I was teaching, every summer I would go out, get a job at one of the local resorts, local clubs, just to hone my skills, just to make sure that I was up with things. I would either take a job as an executive chef or a head Garde Manger chef or something like that. So I always worked. Which explains why I'm so tired. I've been working since I was like 12. But it's so important that they take summer jobs, that they go out and they don't just take a summer job. They get a summer job in a resort area where they're a fry cook at, a clam shack somewhere down on Cape Cod. So they get the taste of it, because in my mind, it makes no sense to spend the amount of money you're going to spend to become a chef and walk out in the industry cold and stand there and go, what the heck did I just do? What is this all about? What are you talking about Saturday nights? What are you talking about, no Christmas Eve with my family, and that type of thing. So I always strongly encourage them to work, always. When we were going to school, when I was going to school back in the 70s, in order for us to graduate, we had to log in, I can't remember the exact amount, 500 hours of field experience. And that's where I actually, believe it or not, that's where I kind of met my my semi-mentor, Stanley Nickus, because he ran the Castle Restaurant up in Leicester. And that, as the crow flies from my home in Sutton, was only, 15 to 20 miles. So I was his first apprentice from Johnson and Wales.
Good. Now talk about certification and getting credentials in that area in the industry. Not only experience, not only degrees, but can you speak to someone that may be listening, your thoughts on that?
I did certifications. I went the education route and, got the bachelor's degree, the master's degree, and that type of things. All of my certifications are in food safety. And I think that that's extremely important. Everybody has to get that if you're going to stay in the culinary industry. I never did go for the ACF certifications or any of those types of things. My personal opinion, I found it to be too political as far as, it's who you know kind of a scenario. Education for me was a much more fascinating track. Plus I was learning something. And I've got any food safety certification you can possibly imagine, certified food safety professional being the highest. So I find it important to do that if that is something that you decide you want to pursue. But it gives the people who are involved with it a sense of belonging to something a little bit bigger than themselves. I know my friend Ray McHugh. He's a proponent for like ACF and all of these certifications, and I think that's great. I think it's great if it's something that you want to do.
What about professional organizations? There's other ones besides that maybe someone can get involved in.
Sure. Les Amis d'Escoffier. I'm a member of Les Amis d'Escoffier. I am the first female chairholder in Les Amis d'Escoffier.
Wow.
Franz Lemoyne, how do you like me now? No such thing as a woman chef. Yep, okay. That, Le Chendreau de Sur, a lot of these different hospitality groups, especially, I think it's extremely important that you get involved with your local hospitality association, because that grouping right there gives you a lot of leverage to move into other areas, especially if you stay within your own community or your own state, however it happens to work. I know that the Rhode Island Hospitality Association is a very, very strong force here in Rhode Island as far as implementing new procedures with opening restaurants and food safety and all of that. They've partnered closely with the Department of Health in the governor's office and all of that. So I would say those types of things are extremely important as well.
Mm-hmm. Now that you're retired, what is your next plans? I mean, I know you had a consulting company for a while. Do you still do that? Is that still going to be in the future? Are you taking time off? Are you going to take up golf? What?
Well, something, I hope to keep Calibrated Kitchens going. The few clients that I worked with have closed up shop. So it's the trickle-down effect, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that when we start getting things rolling again, because what I did is I sell myself as an insurance policy. I go in and I inspect their kitchens, and I look for the same things that the Department of Health would look for. And having the experience as the food safety liaison, I know where everything is, I know where to look. You're not going to hide it. I know where to look. So I go in and do the inspections, and then I write it up and I send it to the food and beverage manager or the manager and the chief cook, executive chef, whoever it happens to be. But the executive chef both have to be on board. And it's strictly confidential, and it's only for them to get better. So when the Department of Health comes in and inspects them, they don't get a bad review. I would like to keep that going, but I love to write, which is unusual for a lot of people because they don't like to, but I love to write. I eventually would like to get involved with writing for a blog, or maybe doing a couple of food safety pieces for Food Safety News or something like that. I actually entered the scholarship fair this past year on food safety, short stories and case studies. And I've written several of them for the sanitation classes. And it's all based on observations, things that you see every single day. A lot of people don't think about, they don't look at. I would go in, local restaurant, sit at the bar, have a drink, and watch what takes place at the garnish station. The hands in with the maraschino cherries and the olives and all of that, and I'd write a case study on it.
Wow.
So writing is a possibility. Golf is not.
Yeah. Now, is food safety a viable career for someone coming out of culinary school? And if so, how would they go about that? How would you, if someone was interested in that, how would you guide them or tell them to, pursue that?
Food safety, I think, is going to be a very, very important component of our industry moving forward for a lot of reasons. With this coronavirus and, personal hygiene and training and all of that, I think food safety is going to be huge. And if anybody is interested in doing it, I recommend that they contact or communicate with their local Department of Health and find out how to proceed. If they're looking for anybody, fill out an application, take a look at the website, see what it's all about, volunteer to tag along as an apprentice. Do something like that if you're interested in that.
Good advice. Now, you were told that women cannot be chefs. Obviously, that's changed.
Imagine that, yeah.
But what would you say to maybe a female today that wanted to get into it? Is it different? Is it all the same? Or was it something they should know getting into culinary school, into the industry, into food service, into hotels?
How do I answer this? I've never been part of this Me Too movement or any of that. I like to consider myself the Me Too movement, because I was working in a kitchen in a man's industry 35 years ago, more. And I would say to any gal who wanted to get into the industry, number one, hold your salt. Don't be intimidated. I had no problem whatsoever if, they talk about sexual harassment and all of this sort of stuff. And that at this point is a very touchy subject. But again, 70s, 80s, and when I was in the kitchens, I was a young woman, and I was cute. I wasn't, but I was cute enough. And the guys, I'd have no problem. They'd come over if someone came over and made a comment to me or something like that. I'd have no problem just like stabbing them. You can't do it now. And I'm not kidding, to be honest with you, Colin. I remember I worked with this one guy, and he would walk up behind me all the time, and he'd pinch me on the back of the thigh. And I said to him, one more time. And he'd walk up behind me, pinch me on the back of the thigh. And I had a small little tiny paring knife. It was about an inch long, and I was carving vegetables for a crudité tray. And he walked up behind me, and he pinched me in the thigh, and I went like that, and I got him right in the forearm. You know something? He never pinched me in the thigh again. No. But any younger gal getting into the industry, you have to be prepared to work as hard, if not harder, and work smarter, not harder, and prove yourself. Prove yourself. If you want to stay in the industry, prove yourself, or open your own business.
Human resources doesn't put up with it like, back in the 70s and 80s. So today there's so many, outlets. Just say something. Talk to somebody if there is that going on.
Yes. And something, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, of course, because, it's out there. It's out there all over the place. And, to be very honest with you, the only time I've ever seen a chef just kind of like drop off the face of the planet at Johnson and Wales is if there were rumors that he was, doing something that he shouldn't be doing with a female student.
And then gone.
Yeah. It's like, whatever happened to him? Haven't seen him in a while. Gone.
Don't play around.
Nope, not at all.
So maybe you could talk a little bit more about or clarify for those that are in a dead-end job. You talked about, you got to grow. You got to keep moving. You got to, keep it interesting. And maybe say that again, because I think that's important to hear for all careers, because life is short.
If you find yourself traveling to work on any given day and you're saying to yourself, God, I dread going in there. It's time to go and move on. If you find yourself saying, if I drive up and down Allen's Ave one more time and hit the same pothole again, I'm going to lose my mind. It's time to move on. And it was time for me to move on. I'm only 64. But it was time for me to move on. I had been with the university, again, 45 years. I have seen a lot of, so much, just so much growth and so many changes and so, many people and deans and directors and mentors and, then it got to the point where I said, something, I don't have another change in me. I really don't. This semester thing, this, virtual thing, my generation is so analog and these kids are so digital. I didn't have it in me. And I said, something, I have to move on. And that's kind of what prompted me into moving. And the timing was perfect from my perspective because I went out early March, I told you, because of the surgery, and I just never went back. And I had planned I had given my dean and my department chair my letter of retirement on my 64th birthday in January. And I said, well, that's appropriate. That'll take me till June, January, February, March, April, May, June. 1 month for every decade I've been here.
What is one common myth about the profession or culinary school, the industry, a kitchen that you want to debunk? That isn't true, but you hear it all the time. That
the chefs are mean. Just that the chefs are mean. They're not. They're not. Some of the kids think that, oh, we heard you were so mean. I'm not mean. I'm like the sweetest person you ever wanted to meet. Chef so-and-so isn't mean. It's, you have to be disciplined. That's the thing that the students don't like, the discipline.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with mean. Just here's the...
Have to be disciplined.
Here's the agenda. Here's the rules. Here's the process.
Nothing to do with mean, but tomato, discipline mean.
Well, as we come to the end of our chat today, before we wrap up, is there any last minute advice or guidance that you want to leave with the listeners? Something you want to share?
I would say start collecting worthwhile books. I have a stack of them I brought with me. One of my favorites is The Food Lover's Companion, The New Food Lover's Companion, The Chef's Companion. I would take a look at the classics, Larousse, Escoffier. I would make it a point to find a mentor and latch onto that person and suck up as much knowledge as you possibly can. I would also say that it's important to keep your family involved with what you're doing. And if you like to travel, and don't get in a job where you don't have a lot of options available to you. You know, a lot of the kids like to come out and take the first thing they want to do is I'm gonna go and take an executive chef's job. Okay, but do you know how to do all the other stations first? So get experience, family, of course, and start your collection. Start your collection.
And you mentioned mentorship and how important it is, and something I agree with, but how does someone go about getting someone? Someone may be listening to this and saying, yeah, I get a mentor. How do I do that? How would you advise them to find a mentor, approach a mentor, or, maybe make that connection?
Something, I think it's a relationship that just kind of develops. Students will, let's say, latch on to someone like Chef Terranova, and it's like this perfect guiding force, I guess, that you automatically know that there's a connection, and you find yourself talking with that person, and what are you doing, and why are you doing that, and asking questions. And then if you're getting responses, you can develop the professional relationship from there. But if you're like, go away and leave me alone, that person probably isn't for you. One of the things that the university did at one point was assign a faculty mentor to a group of individual students. I never agreed with that theory, because a mentor-mentee relationship is so personal that you'll find whoever it is and you'll be with that person for life. I mean, whoever thought that a Hungarian Jew who survived Auschwitz and a 23-year-old redheaded girl from Sutton, Massachusetts would spend 38 years together? Couldn't make it up.
Nope. Yeah, that's good. And I think the schools do it because they just want to give them a starting place.
Get them a starting point.
But if that isn't a good fit and they have assigned it, pick another one. Find another faculty member, because, educators, teachers, we're helpers by nature. So just go up and be a sponge, ask them questions. And if there's a connection, as you mentioned, pursue that, and it can turn into hopefully a lifetime like you had with yours. Right.
Exactly.
Good. Is there any last minute question that I should have asked that I didn't, or is there anything else you want to share, or anything that we didn't already touch upon?
I think we covered a lot. I just hope that the people who see this get a little background of my history and my experience, because as I mentioned to you when we first started our conversation, they see me teaching menu planning and cost control. But they don't know that there's 40 plus years behind me. That's been a long road to hoe. That's made Chef Linda Kender what Linda Kender is today.
Yeah, so true. As I mentioned, I teach cost control, and they call me chef, and they go, "Why do we call you chef? You teach math." And I'm like, you don't know my story, right, where I was. This is just where I'm now. And I was definitely a chef, certified executive, if they could see the bio and stuff, but they automatically just, they're just young, and they just see you and they think, well, you're a professor. Why are you wearing a chef coat? It's like, well, it's a long story.
It's a long story.
And I'm just glad I'm here where I'm at now.
Me too.
Well, that is just about all the time we have for this episode. And I want to first thank you, Linda, for coming on the show today and sharing your culinary school story with all of us, and the advice and the honesty and everything that you shared. I think it was so beneficial. And again, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Colin. It's been my pleasure.
All right. Well, enjoyed our chat. Take care and bye-bye.
Excellent. Thank you, Colin. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
And a big thanks and appreciation also goes out to all of you, the listeners. We hope you enjoy the show and this episode. You all are a big part of this show, so please let us know what you think. Your comments are always welcome, and they help us in making the best show possible. You can email them to culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com. That's culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com, or even leave us a voicemail at area code 207-835-1275. That's area code 207-835-1275. And if you like the show, we have a big ask of all of you, and that is to share the podcast with everyone you know, and to give us a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, until our next Culinary School Story, take care and be well. Bye-bye. Culinary School Stories.